Hello everybody, it is Sunday, February the 4th, 2024, and this podcast is coming to you from a very cold Japan as the weekend draws to a close. It is grey, it is wet, and it is cold. The three reasons I left England, and now I'm living it. But it's been cold before. But this is the first day of the year, really, that it's rained. So we've got away with a month with dryness, and now it's pissing it down. But we're not here to talk about the rain and the weather in Japan. We are here to talk about getting away with it. Getting away with it. Because the big story in Japan for the last 10 days has been a fella that has got away with it for a very, very, very long time. Just to put it into context, this fella has been getting away with it since a man who is turning 53 at the end of March, he has been getting away with it since I was 4 years old. The whole of the Japanese constabulary have been trying to chase this fella down for 50 years. I'm sure the military were in on it for a while, and they have been unable to catch him. One of the most technologically advanced countries in the entire world has been trying to catch this fella for 50 years, and they hadn't done it, and they didn't do it. So, let me tell you about the story of Satoshi Kirishima. Big round of applause for him. I mean, the shit he got up to in 70s is a bit questionable. You know, he did kill 8 people, but kudos to you for getting away with it for so long. Now, the thing is, Satoshi died in Kamakura. Now, Kamakura is the next town to where I live. I say town. The town I live in is tiny. Kamakura is a small town, but he has been walking among us for all these years, and even his nearest and dearest did not have a clue. And I'm going to tell you how we got away with it. More and more details are coming out as I'm making this podcast. But from what I've been reading over the last week, I'll tell you what I know. Now, Satoshi Kirishima, that's his real name. Shall we call it his stage name? Or the name he's been going under for the last 50 years was Hiroshi Uchida. Now, Uchi-san is what he was commonly known as, lovingly known as, because everybody that worked with him and that knew him thought he was a really, really nice man. A good egg, as we would say in England. He lived in Fujisawa. Now, if you draw a line from where I live, the first town that you would hit would be Kamakura, where he died, and then the next town is Fujisawa, and he lived there. So, 70 years ago, Satoshi was born in Hiroshima. Now, I've not visited Hiroshima yet. I've been here years and years. I've not even been there yet. But it's to the west of the country. Famous because it got flattened by the Americans. So he was born there 70 years ago, and then he came up to Tokyo to study. And he was studying at Meiji University in the middle of Tokyo. And I think that's where he picked up all his beliefs about Japan, and he didn't really like Japan. The expansion before World War II and the empire building that they were doing there, that didn't seem to sit well with him. And then the way that the country had gone after World War II, when the Americans came in, and all these multinational companies that were making money and off the toil of other people's sweat in third world countries, it didn't sit well with him. So what Satoshi did, he started this 3-member group at university called Sasori. which in English means scorpion. I've no idea why they called it scorpion. I suppose it sounds very, very menacing. A scorpion is a menacing animal, but that's what he called it. And he had 3 members. Now, he soon graduated very quickly. So what he started to do was, they were against everything Japanese. So Sasori were then built up into a left-wing group. And then they morphed into the East Asia Anti-Japan Armed Front. Bit of a mouthful, to be honest. What would the anagram of that be? Egiafa. You couldn't really make it into what, could you? Armed Forces, AF. You'd just be thinking as fuck, wouldn't you? Yeah, there's not really you can make of that. But yeah, the East Asia Anti-Japan Armed Front is what it loosely translated into. So what they were wanting to do was they wanted to bring all these big Japanese companies to their knees. And they didn't get anywhere near doing it, but what they did do was take out a lot of innocent people, which is the part of the story that doesn't really sit well with me, or should it be with other people. But I'm not here to talk about that part. I'll give you the details. April 19th, 1975, he set off a bomb in the Ginza district. For them who don't know what the Ginza district is in Tokyo, it would be Oxford Street in the UK or Rodeo Drive in LA. I've no idea in America with Fifth Avenue. I've no idea. But it's the area where you go and buy your expensive shit. A place where I never buy clothes. Never. Why would I go to Ginza and spend £50,000 sterling on a fucking handbag? So I'm with him for that, bombing that fucking place. But killing people, yeah, not down with that at all. So he bombed the Ginza district. Now the police were looking for him, and he was nowhere to be found. And then he set off another bomb outside Mitsubishi Heavy Industries in Tokyo. Now that one was the deadly one. He killed 8 employees and bystanders, and he injured 165. And that was the second bomb that went off. Now I think, I'm just spitballing here, I think he got a bit of a conscience on him, to be honest, because after that it just went radio silent. So I think what he's realised the depth of what he's done, and he's gone, right, I'm out, done. Now the other people that were with him, there were 2 other people, and they're still at large now. They got out of the country, and I've been looking online to try and find out where these 2 other people are, and I couldn't find where they are. One of them's a woman. Obviously, the other one's a fella. But they're somewhere abroad, and they've been somewhere abroad since the 70s, since mid-70s. Not been able to bring them back. They've not been able to get deported. Anyway, the details that are coming out about Uchida-san, Hiroshi, that's his stage name, if you remember, was that he lived in Fujisawa. Now, about a year ago, he was going to the hospital and he was getting treated for stomach cancer. Now, in Japan, what happens is you get a health card. So every time you go to doctors, you present this health card, they have a look at you, they treat you, and then it's not free in Japan. So you've got to pay 30%, but it's still cheap. You're not going bankrupt like you are in America. Yeah, they take the piss out of you in America. But here, you've got to pay. It's minimal. It's not much. So what Hiroshi was doing was, to get under the radar of the police so he won't going to get caught, He had no social security number, he had no medical insurance, and he had no driving license. And he's gone without these three things for 50 years. Now that takes some doing. That takes some real doing in a country like this to be able to go under the radar for so long without getting caught. But he did it. He worked for a Japanese construction company. There are a lot of these little Japanese construction companies all over Japan. You can't walk out of the door and swing a dead cat without hitting one. You know, all the houses that you see in Japan, all these houses that look old, or it's a traditional Japanese house, it'll only be at the very most 40 or 50 years old. You buy an house for $250,000 here, you get it built. As soon as you turn the key in that door and walk in, that house is going down in value. It's like buying a car. Buying an house in Japan is like buying a car. They depreciate as soon as you walk in that front door. So what happens is after about 50 years, a big bulldozer will come in and knock the whole house down because it's just made of wood. The house I'm in is made of wood. You can't build out with bricks and mortar here because of the earthquakes. So these little construction companies pop up all over the place. So when somebody wants to build a house, they'll buy a plot of land, or 99 times out of 100, there'll be an house already on it. That needs to get knocked down, and then a new house is built. So you've got little construction companies that specialise in building these houses. And the houses, they'll pour the concrete for the base, and then these houses just turn up on the back of a flatback lorry, and they're put together like a jigsaw, like some Meccano. It's all wood and cement. So he worked for one of these companies. Now, the way he got around it, because if you're wanting to rent a house in Japan, now for me as a foreigner, it's a fucking nightmare. But because my wife's Japanese, it were a lot easier for her. But even then, you've got so many forms of ID to show, employment history, you need a guarantor, all kinds of bullshit to get yourself somewhere to live. So what he did was, when he worked for this company, which he worked for the thick end of 40 years, he noticed that they had an in-company house next to the construction company. So he lived there. So there was no need for him to show his ID to a rental firm to get himself a place. He just lived on the company premises. Now, I've cycled past the place today. I were out working today, and I cycled past the place where he lived, and the fucker didn't live well. He did not live well. I'll put, for them of you watching on YouTube, I'll put a link down in me. No, what? Have a look on Instagram. Have a look on Instagram after this goes up, and I'll stick the photo of his house on there. He won't living well at all. You hear about these freedom fighters and what a romantic life it must be to be running around fighting for your rights and bombing people out of house and home. Not for this fella. Jesus Christ. Yeah, he obviously wasn't homeless, but he seemed to have lived like a homeless person. So he got under the radar for that. He didn't have a bank account. So how was he getting paid? Now, another thing. I've worked for a couple of companies since I've been in Japan. And some of these companies have insisted on paying me cash in hand. And you're thinking, well, all right then, I'll go cash in hand, but you need to give me a little bit extra because I'm having to pay for my own insurance, my own pension. So you need to give me a bit of a taste, shall we say. So I think that's what's gone on there. So 2 out of the 3 things he's got sorted. He's got the house, he's getting paid cash in hand. So nobody knows where he is, nobody knows what he's doing. I don't know how he's got his ID. as Hiroshi Uchida, unless he's walked around a graveyard and found a name. But you see, in Japan, when you die and you go in family plot, you get given a different name to be written on family plot. You don't die and have your living name put on the plot. Excuse me. So I don't know how he's got hold of that name. I don't know why he's chosen that name. You also don't have the dates of when you were born and when you die on your gravestone. It's weird. It's completely different to what we do in West. Anyway, he's come up with this name. He's got his house. He's got his job where nobody can get contact him with. Now, another thing which would be difficult in, I think, any other country apart from Japan, is he never had a driving license. He never had a driving license, never had a car. And the thing about Japan is you don't need one. You don't need a car. The public transport system in this country is so good that when I go back to England, where a 15-minute delay is expected, it shocks me. It's quite jarring. So what's happened is he's not had to bother with a car license. And where he lives in Fujisawa, there's a big train station that will take you west to Atami, to Hiroshima, his hometown, and there's a train that'll take you east to Tokyo and then up to the north of the country. So he's living pretty central. He's living pretty central, and everything's there for him. And that's the third thing. He doesn't need a car, he's got a house, and he's getting paid cash in hand. That has enabled him to sail under the radar. Anytime he was sick, he's going to the hospital and he's just paying them cash in hand. So nothing's getting put on any sort of health card. He's just saying, I ain't got one. Just saying he ain't got one. And nobody's questioned it. So, what this fella did there have been a couple of people that have come out of the woodwork that knew him. Not many. He's had no family, didn't get married, had no kids. I don't know if he's got any family still living. They've not been found yet. I don't know if he was still in contact with them. I'm sure all that will come out later. But what I know now is the people that worked with him said he was a very, very nice man. And like with most of these criminals, where it all comes out in wash later on down the line, they were gobsmacked. You know, you have those stories of the father at family just annihilating his fucking family, going at him with an hammer in the middle at night, you know, battering 5-year-old daughter, and then doing the same with wife and son, and then hanging himself off a banister. And the interview neighbours are what? I don't believe it. He doesn't look like the man that had taken a hammer to his kid's head. But you get him. You do get him. And it's always the ones that surprise you. I mean, if I did anything like that, I think most people would go, oh, yeah, fully expected that from that twat. Yeah, there wouldn't be many people that would say, I wouldn't have expected that from Darren. I think most people would be going, yeah. There was something going on underneath that facade. But with this fella, he seemed to be a right nice bloke. Now, the people that worked with him just said he would come in, he would do his work. He never got on any machinery and operated it because he didn't have the qualifications for it. So he was just a fella that worked at the construction company. The pub owner in his local that he used to go to said he would go in there maybe once or twice a month when he had live music, and he said this fella loved music. James Brown was his favourite artiste, and he would go in there in his work clothes. Now, the work clothes that he was going in suggested to me that he were a construction worker. He wasn't office staff, so he was pretty much blue collar. And he said the fella he'd have one or two drinks and then he'd go home. Just a bloke keeping himself to himself, causing no trouble whatsoever. So what happened about a month ago? Not a month ago. I'm lying. About 2 weeks ago. He was found on the street, just rolling around, holding his stomach. Now, apparently, he'd been having treatment for about a year, but this particular night, he couldn't get himself home. So, a Japanese fella got him up, got him home. His house wasn't that far, and he went into his house. Now, downstairs was storage, and he lived on the second floor. So, this stranger got him upstairs and laid him out on his futon, and then looked around the house, and he said it were a tip. Books everywhere, pots in sink that hadn't been washed up. So he wasn't living well. He wasn't living well at all. And then he just left him. Now, this fella that helped him to his house lived local, and he'd seen him about. He'd seen him about in the neighbourhood. So after he got home, about half an hour later, he heard an ambulance. So he assumed that it was for Satoshi. And it was. So this is in Fujisawa. He gets taken to a hospital in Kamakura. And they said, look, fella, you've not got long. This was January 26th. And he sort of slipped off 29th. So he had 3 days. So obviously the doctor said, look, you got less than a week. And then he just turned to the doctor. He said, I am Satoshi Kirishima. I bombed Tokyo in the 1970s. Please get the police. Now, this doctor seemed very, very surprised and thought it was something to do with the drugs. He was hallucinating with the drugs. But Kirishima seemed to be very, very insistent and made sure that he got the police to turn up. The police turned up and questioned him. Now, at first, the police were a bit wary about what he was saying, and they didn't really believe him. And then he started giving details that only the bomber would know. So they started to take him a bit more serious. So what they did was they kept on questioning him in his hospital bed. And then it turns out they got loads and loads of information from him, but they were still unable to confirm his identity. So they took DNA, they swabbed him, took blood from him, and then he died on the 29th of January. Before he died, he said, look, I want to die my real self. I don't want to be known as Hiroshi Uchida. That's not who I am. I am Satoshi Kirishima. Now, names are really, really important in Japan. Your name is your thing. It's like your reputation. And he was sick of living as Uchida. And he wanted to die as Kirishima. So off he went on the 29th of January, 7:30 in the morning. Gone. They got his DNA checked, and then on the 2nd of February, only 2 days ago on Friday, it was confirmed that it was him. It was this bomber that had been on the run for 50 years. And whatever you say about him, I know he did kill people, but to keep that shit up for 5 decades is admirable, I would say. There's some good going. I mean, we've got a couple of big hitters in England that did it. Ronnie Knight did it, but he got caught. He were in Marbella for a fair few years. Ronnie Biggs, the great train robber, he got out of the UK in the 60s, went all over the world, just evading the police. He got his wife and kids to Adelaide. He lived in Adelaide for years. And then the police tracked him down there. Off he went over to Brazil, to Rio. And he were very, very close to getting deported with Ronnie Biggs from Rio. So what he did was he plugged this local Brazilian girl, got her pregnant, and then under Brazilian law, you can't get deported if you've got a dependent on the way or you've got a dependent. So they couldn't deport him. So what Ronnie Biggs then did was he opened up, I don't know what it was, I don't think it was a restaurant, but it were a kind of the Ronnie Biggs experience. So you could go and meet Ronnie Biggs, drop him a few quid, and that's how he survived. And there were these photos of Ronnie Biggs with Sting, George Harrison, Supergrass were there. Sex Pistols went and did a movie with him, fuck's sake. But eventually, when his health started failing, Ronnie Biggs wanted to come home, come back to England. So he came back to England to die, but he's still plugged on for, I think, for another 8 years before he died. But yeah, so he's old Satoshi. He's the one that's got away with it. He did it. He won. But did he win? You look at his house, you look how he lived. He never got to have a family, never got to see his kids grow up. I don't know if he kept in touch with his family. I mean, you've done some bad shit in the past and you've had to live like that for 50 years. I don't know. But getting one over on the police, I am all for that. Right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this tale of a man who did not abide by the rules in a country that does nothing but abide by the rules. And I will see you all next week. Adios, everybody.